Okay, so what used to be on these VJ26 Isuzu turbos, these were my cross-flow water, so it was water cooling, and you've got your oil draining down here and your oil input at the top there. So now I'm changing it to when I drill the hole, it's going to be oil cooled in there. According to the forums, that's why these ones keep failing if you have them water cooled. So on the original Aquatrax turbo, you've got the oil line at the top, the side oil line that goes down to the bottom of the engine, and then the underneath one. So this side one normally has a banjo bolt on it as well, banjo bolt at the top, and the one underneath has the two 10mm bolts holding it into place. So now what I've done is previously, when my mechanic had put one of these Isuzu turbos on and set up all the water cooling side of it, he'd put threaded joiners down on the actual line that he'd cut, the oil line, down to the bottom of the engine. Thankfully it was threaded, so I'm now threading one of these nipples. This one's already in here and it's screwed in, so I'm going to feed that and screw that into the oil drain down to the bottom of the engine. This flexibility will give me enough on this new VJ26 that I'm going to put on, will give me enough flexibility to easily line up with the side, whichever side. If this is the top, this is the two 10mm bolts under here for the oil drain as well. So technically this one here will be on this side, and it joins down and it goes underneath the engine to the very lower part of the engine. So they're the three oil lines that are on a standard Aquatrax turbo. One of the top ones here is just blocked off, obviously, so it makes it 3 rather than 4. So with this new, just put that back down there. So with this new Isuzu turbo, the VJ26, I'll be joining up this particular oil line inside the actual jet ski itself, and I'll just quickly show you where that is. So where the spanner is here is where this line is going to screw into there. So when it screws into there, and then this particular nipple end here, as I showed before, goes to the top end and goes into the actual side of the turbo cartridge itself. The other thing you can do is a bit of the banjo bolt setup that my mechanic mate initially cut off so that he could put it on the side of the wastegate housing, and it was like that on the side, and he created extra water lines to run in through from the water that was already going through. It normally comes out, or it does come out the bottom of the wastegate manifold. He tapped into the side one here where the thread is there, so that he could create an extra water line. So this is normally the oil line off the side of the cartridge that goes down to the bottom of the motor. So thankfully he put this little threaded setup on, put a blank on it, so that was one of the oil drains that wasn't being used anymore. So the water-cooled manifold, the water-cooled cartridge ended up having just the two oil lines, and then it had the two water lines going in and out. So you can still use the banjo setup if you want. However, I'm going with the nipple setup here that will screw into the side of the cartridge, and it'll make a much easier process for joining that oil line up. And just for further reference, as I was speaking about, this particular oil line goes in there and goes to the side of the cartridge. You'd be familiar with this oil feed here. Comes off the side of the engine, and that goes in the top of the cartridge with the banjo bolt. And then this other oil feed, oil drain, is the second one that goes down near the bottom of the actual engine as well. And yeah, my mechanic mate put some threaded joins on there, brazed a few bits together. So that's got the, underneath this cover here, that's just stopping oil going everywhere, that's got the 2 holes for the 10mm bolts underneath the cartridge. So that's the underneath. This is the one that goes to oil feed on the top, and then that one there is the third one that goes from the side of the cartridge down and underneath. So hopefully that helps explain where all the oil lines are in relation to the Isuzu cartridge that will be going on. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. Today we'll be taking you through the processes involved in the turbos for Honda Aquatrax, the 12 series F12x R12x. Here is your standard Honda Aquatrax turbo. One of the side ports is blocked off on the cartridge. The other one comes out, goes down to the bottom of the motor. The 2 holes at the bottom here, the 10mm bolts, that oil drains down into the bottom of the actual engine as well. And the top one here, banjo bolt, is the inlet for that particular side there. This turbo is all jammed up, unfortunately. That was off my F12x. So I've got all brand new stuff to pull that apart and rebuild that. I might talk about that at another stage. This is the Isuzu cartridge, slightly different housing. It's slightly longer on the inlet feed there and slightly taller on there. Made no difference at all when I put it on my jet ski. The intercooler pipe went on there easily, and the inlet air cleaner pipe comes across onto there fairly easily as well. This one was set up as water cooled straight through, so I've had 2 of these now that have failed because of that. And the actual, there's a lot of movement in this, unfortunately. The bearings failed, which according to the forums is because I was running water cooled rather than setting up like drilling extra hole and running it as oil cooled only. So that's what's going to change. Just for your info, that is what a banjo bolt looks like. That's got the, don't know if you can see it down in there, it's got the mesh in there, the mesh filter. A lot of people just drill that out because apparently that can create blockages, which is not very good for your turbo. So that's an example of that if you didn't know where that was before. And that particular bolt is for the side of the turbo itself. It's too fat, doesn't go into the top. It's one of the actual side ones. Just quickly show you, this is my brand new VJ26 Isuzu diesel turbos, is what they're generally used for, 4-cylinder diesels. This hot side is ever so slightly larger than the actual wastegate manifold. So on my particular ski, that has been slightly bought out by my mechanic friend to accommodate this slightly larger wheel. But I believe somebody's already worked out which particular turbo you can get that's got the exact same size wheel for mounting just straight directly into the wastegate housing. However, in my case, I've ordered this one because it is specific for what I've already had bought out ever so slightly. This compressor wheel is also ever so slightly taller. You've probably heard about it before. It's about 2 millimeters taller. So it won't fit inside a standard Aquatrax housing. One of these particular housings here, you can get them from Alibaba. I think, I'm trying to remember now, I reckon they cost me something like $20 odd Australian or something like that. So then you get a slightly taller housing, ever so slightly, that goes over the top and gives you clearance for these fins. These fins potentially will give you better compression, so when it compresses the air, you'll potentially might get a bit more performance. That's for other people to comment on. I don't particularly care about the performance side of it. This cartridge here in Australia is $99 delivered, so it's basically an El Cheapo. But for that sort of price, doing a few modifications can be worth the time and hassles. So I'll go into it a little bit later, is the drilling of, from what I've been told, a 3mm hole. So drilling of a 3mm hole, so that this standard setup here of your standard Aquatrax turbo, when you're doing an actual VJ26 Isuzu turbo, by drilling, I'll find out exactly where before, by drilling a particular hole in one of the water jackets, you are then allowing the oil to get through from the top feed into the water jacket area as well, and that's why I'll speak about the water jacket side of it later as well. So stand by for the information on that. Okay, so sometimes I might accidentally refer to the turbo as being an Isuzu turbo, but what I've actually got is the VJ26, which is the Mazda and Ford Utes, I believe it was put on. So it has the water ports going straight through, as opposed to an original Aquatrax turbo, which has both of these ports on the side. And then there's my brand new one here, which down the bottom here is the oil drain. Up the top is where oil goes in, and then what the other side one, one of the side ones gets blocked up, which will be basically this side, and then the opposite side is where I'm going to be drilling a hole into that cavity section inside there to actually line up with the inside of there. So oil will be going to the main shaft of the turbo, but it will also be able to, through a hole being drilled across and into this section, means oil will be able to fill up what would normally be the water cavity. So I'll put that one down. Piece of advice is use cobalt drill bits. Cobalt 2.5mm. Initially I was told potentially use a 3, but then I've had advice from several people now, use a 2.5 for drilling the oil gallery. That will be sufficient on these turbos. If you were using the Isuzu turbo, I believe that's a drop-in turbo where you just have to, let me just put those down for a sec, where you just have to reclock the actual compressor housing to make it line up vertical, but the rear hot side turbine is already small enough that it fits in the standard Honda Aquatrax turbo wastegate manifold setup. However, these ones, being the Mazda Ford ones, that is ever so slightly bigger, so that's the reason why the wastegate manifold had to be slightly bored out. But the positive of that is this is then directly where it needs to be on this particular model turbo, so you don't need to reclock this. Reclocking this is probably easier work than actually needing to bore a slightly larger hole through the wastegate manifold. So generally, might be difficult to see. I'm going to be testing on this particular turbo. That's how it would normally sit in the wastegate manifold. Oil drain down there, oil feed in the top, and there's two sections here which are going to be difficult to see. One of them is a top ridge and one of them is a slightly dropped down ridge. If you drill through the slightly down ridge and you go on a slight angle as well, you'll be able to get across like this, sort of into that main oil feed line. Then that's going to fill up all this cavity in here with oil as well. So that's the reason why it's necessary to drill them out. So I'm going to test it on this one. Another thing is cutting compound. Supposedly that makes life easier for when you're drilling. I'm not going to be using this standard drill bit. Of course, I'm going to be using one of these cobalt drill bits. Down here it even says for cast iron. So 2.5mm there, and use some solution to help it drill. So if I drill through the drop down section in that hole, what that's going to mean is I'm drilling through less material, so hopefully the drill bit will get through and I won't go snapping it. Supposedly that's the advantage of using cobalt as well, is a much stronger drill bit, less likely that you're going to snap it, as opposed to these cheap high-speed metal drill bits, which will quite often you would have come across it if you're drilling on an angle, you're putting too much pressure on, snap. So that can be very frustrating. So that's what I'm going to do. If I succeed with that next step there, I'll video my result with the actual drill bit through where it needs to go. So success practicing on this turbo here. Don't know how much you can see in there, but that's the angle that the drill's on, a very slight angle. And what's happened here, let me see if I can just set this light up here. So what happened here is I went through the shallower section rather than the raised section, so the less amount of material of the cast iron to drill through, and it's gone straight through to this top feeder hole. Very difficult to see in there, but don't know if you can even see, there's a little hole in there. It's right at that top section there. So that has succeeded, getting the drill hole straight through there. Literally held the turbo up like this with the drill, slowly started drilling the hole, and then just drill at sort of average sort of speed. letting the weight of the turbo, so you're not pushing the drill up in, just let the weight of the turbo push against the tip of the drill bit, and it quite easily went straight up in through into this feeder cavity area, way down low on the thread, so there's still lots of thread there for the banjo bolt to go onto. And that has now been a success. And then when I do that to the new turbo cartridge, I'll block off this side, so oil will go into here. It'll also come through into the whole water cavity, and then the banjo bolt that would have gone there, I have one of these with an oil line going to it. You can still put the banjo bolt there if you want to. For that oil line that goes down to the lower section of the engine, and then this is the drop down section where the two 10mm bolts bolt into, holding that oil line on, and that also goes down to the bottom of the engine. And that's just basically, once the oil circulated through here, it all goes out accordingly. So that now is proof of concept. It's shown me how easy it is to drill that hole on that sort of an angle. It's an ever so slight angle. Rather than going in straight, it's gone in at a very slight angle like that. And if I can find it again, so yep, that's just gone whole way through. So now I've tested it on the old cartridge. I'm going to drill it in on this cartridge here. So again, oil drain with the double holes on the bottom, oil feed on the top, and then not this particular side, that one's going to be blocked off. That's the compressor side. So this is the easiest spot to get to with a bolt rather than where the engine is right here. So this is why I want to drill this side. Pretty well would work the same on the other side as well. So just cutting compound. Don't know how much of a difference it made, but I thought might as well try it. That's what I got told to do. Again, difficult to see in there, but basically you can afford to be quite liberal with it. Small drill bit, look at the spot that you're aiming for, start drilling the hole. And then you can just let the weight of the turbo slowly feeding through. I'll just briefly take that one out there. So yes, you'll get the I don't know if you can see in there. I can see the hole in there, but I don't know if the camera will pick it up. But basically, just the weight of the turbo down on there will drill that hole. And I'm just about to run out of recording battery time, so I'll stop it there and I'll finish the rest of the drilling. So that's the completed hole there. Hopefully you can see that. But the hole drilled all the way through. if I can just into that spot there. Just push that drill bit through. And that went into the top feeder hole. So that has achieved what it needed to achieve. So that waterway now becomes an oil gallery. So the whole turbo now will have oil going through every internal orifice area. As you can see, it has to go on a slight angle. And then if I can get it from above, you might be able to see. Yes. So you can also see that's an angle that way as well, heading towards that particular hole. Now, as far as the inside of the jet ski is concerned, this is the banjo bolt oil feed line that goes to the top. The actual turbo itself I'm going to have blocked off on this side because the whole cavity now becomes an oil gallery. This hose here is the one that goes further down there. And it goes down and around in underneath the lower section of the engine. Now this hose here is the main drain, the 10mm bolts that go into that at the bottom of the turbo cartridge. I've just created this little bent pipe here and clamped on some hose to join on with the other section that's been cut. What this does is it means that when you go to put this on, you've got plenty of room out here to bolt it up, because this is a difficult part to get onto the bottom of the turbo. So a lot easier out here to bolt it up, and then you can feed it back down into position, and then obviously feed the turbine into here as well, clamp it up, and then put your top banjo on. Well, you don't have to put the top one on. Put this side one on. Potentially before putting the top one on, maybe leak some oil, dribble some oil can down in through the top section, and then bolt that on to try and give a little bit of oil into your turbo. But generally, before you even think of starting the turbo, you'd either want to do an oil pressure test, or you want to do disconnect coil packs so it won't start, and then turn it over several times to get the oil flowing through the turbo area. Another thing is, I've got this earth wire here. So that's the location to put an earth wire, which the other end goes to down where the battery will be. So I've found that to be a successful way of getting a good earth to the engine, is that particular area there. Some people have asked me before, so I thought I'll just chuck it in this video as well so you can see that. Another thing is, when I disconnect hoses and stuff, I just put a piece of cardboard around and staple it onto the hose, and write a brief description of where it goes. I had put it on all the other hoses as well, but I've started putting this back together now. But that's an easy way to keep track of, especially when you don't get to work on your car, boat, jet ski every single day and you start pulling things apart. I like to just have those sort of labels so that I can keep track of where everything's at and what goes back onto where. And in particular with this jet ski trailer, I've just mounted a pole near my spare tyre there, another pole here, used a couple of old washing machine side panels, and it's just created a temporary rack for me, a couple of temporary racks to put all my bits and pieces which I unbolt off of the jet ski. The reason why I made these temporary racks is because if I need to move the jet ski trailer, they're all part of the jet ski trailer and they can just move wherever I park the jet ski trailer again. So then parts aren't being moved all over the place or lost or misplaced by anybody else coming past and moving something. So that's just a couple little. Okay, so just to update, it does actually need the housing slightly clocked if you want it vertical, because it will be slightly off to the side like this. However, putting this one in, I have removed that tiny little pin that comes out of that hole, which normally locates into that hole there. I remembered I did that on the turbo the last time I put it in, so that when it's sitting in and the oil lines and all that are connected up, I can twist it back slightly before doing up all the actual clamp that holds it in place to the wastegate itself. So down here you can see I've got a couple of feed lines. Just put that down briefly. So that's the oil line that goes out the side, down the bottom. This is the second oil line that goes down to the bottom of the motor with the 10mm bolts on it. Don't forget to put the gasket on there before you put that on. Fairly easy to put on because I've now got an extended hose pipe on there, so I can move it around wherever I need to line it up with the bottom of the actual turbo itself, the cartridge. And this is the feed line for the top. Obviously has a banjo bolt, so sometimes that can be a little bit awkward to manipulate in place on these aftermarket turbos, and same with this lower one here. That can also be slightly awkward. That's why I've got the longer line on it. And some people have mentioned that this side one as well can have some issues trying to line it up. However, I've got extended piping on that one as well. So all three of mine are an easier setup for me to actually put it back on. I know they work because I've had the previous turbo on there, and that turbo was running fine until it had the issues with the bearings. Now, just on this, you'll see I've put a tube with a blocked off end on the engine side, and then this side here has got the connector for the rubber hose to go onto. Eventually I'm going to take this little blocked off connector off when I find a bolt that will actually clear away everything there. So that was just the latest update. Then I'll put the turbo on, so it should be no issues after that. And it'll be back to running again. So leave it at that. Okay, so there you have it. It's all bolted in place now. You can see there's the side oil line, the top feed-in line, The intercooler pipe doesn't bolt to anything because it's spaced out a little bit more to reach. It's a little bit hard to see, but it's on a slight angle there, but the actual silicone sleeve takes up that bit of difference, and then obviously it comes around and joins into the intercooler. So that is a Mazda Ute, Ford Ute, I think it's the same Ute basically, a 4-cylinder turbo diesel, and that's the VJ26 cartridge it's actually an original Mazda air intake setup on the compressor side there, so it fits the larger compressor wheel. And then obviously this has had the extra hole drilled into the cast iron so that the oil will feed into all the water gallery area as well. So that is the final setup.